my background is I've been a small-scale vegetable grower for about 25 years now. About 20 years ago, I got really involved in permaculture design and working with natural systems and really understanding the ecosystem of the farm. Before I was a farmer, I was a builder, and so very quickly I was like always building the farm. And I think most farmers are builders inherently because we're building soil, we're building infrastructure, things are constantly breaking down, we're constantly having to fix it, and because of the finances of farming, we're often left to our own devices, putting things together, fixing things and stuff. So, as we reclaim farming in this new paradigm here of production, reclaiming the nature of the farmer and how valuable they are to society, but also the skill and the art and the science that they have to know in order to do this right. So unfortunately, most trainings do not give they're kind of more industrial agribusiness schools out there. And then there's other institutions and groups like this that help educate around more the holistic system. And that's really what we're going to focus on today, is like looking at the farm as a whole system is one of the biggest takeaways, rather than its pieces or components working together. They're all connected and working together. They're not individually operating, which is, our society tends to break things down into its silos. Sometimes that's good for us to not get overwhelmed, but a lot of the times in farming, we know, especially when we get into regenerative practices, we're working with nature. And when we're working with nature, we're really collaborating with the natural systems. And so when we collaborate with the natural systems, that really has us kind of step out of our comfort zone sometimes, because it's not on our clock, it's on nature's clock in that sense. So today I was going to share kind of my, as Angela said, some of my experience, but also some key concepts that I think are really important when people look at regenerative organic production, because there's a lot of thoughts, a lot of things out there right now, and it's good to always bring it into context. So that's what we're going to talk about. I have some slides that I'll share as well, just to give some visual examples. But really, those that are on the call, since there's just a few of us here, if there's questions and thoughts that you want to engage with and make this more interactive, totally down with that. And we can feel free to raise your hand or go in that direction. Okay, let me see if I can get this shared. And then Angela, if you monitor the chat, if there's any questions or anything, and if you want to interrupt me.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay. All right, can you see my screen? One photo.
Yes, we can see it. It looks great.
Yeah, I think when I go here and I go to that other picture disappears. There was a picture right here that disappeared, huh? I don't know.
Yeah, it looks good. We see it.
Okay. Yeah, well, so one thing you were just mentioning before we started this call was the diversity and how on small scale, what are the opportunities, I think, when we start practicing this way. And I think one thing that's really important to note is regenerative organic, and breaking that down to understand the context, the definition, but really in the simplest of terms is that the regenerative practices are working with nature and leaving it, it's generating itself, it's regenerating, and it's a practice, whereas the organic part is really looking at the inputs. And right now there's a big debate on regenerative and not organic, and that's a difficult conversation to get into, because there's a way you can engage with the organic component that will accelerate and get to regeneration when we're weaning off of chemicals or we're using chemicals in that practice. it slows the process down, and it really is like a stepped restoration project rather than a regeneration project, in my opinion. I do work for the Regenerative Organic Alliance. We are very firm on the stance of organics, and I'm convinced after seeing dozens and dozens of projects over this country and internationally that you totally can do it organically, and there really is no reason, even with all the finances and the transitional timelines that people have. I hope I can share some of that today of how you can actually do it in a really good way. The key, biggest takeaways today, I'll name them right now, is soil moisture, cover crops. All right, so if you just remember two things, what did you get from this webinar today? Is like, he talked about soil moisture and cover crop, working with nature. that can be a good one. Oh, there's that photo. So these are just two photos of my experience. I'm coastal California. I'm currently up in the mountains of the Sierras where it's warm and hot, and I appreciate the sun. I appreciate the heat because things do grow in that. They do like it. But not the lettuces and the different greens in the summer, which has been a blessing. Both picture on the left is at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, where I was a farmer for about 4 years. And the one on the right is another place up in West Sonoma County. So you can see a lot of soil. You don't see any soil, right? It's all covered, meaning that we're putting living pathways, we're doing mulch. There's not any exposed soil. And we'll talk about a little bit about that. So, I'm an organic agricultural consultant. I really try to inspire people. So I'm a grower as well. I'm not just making stuff up as I go. I've been growing, I've been doing it, and then I get asked to help others. And so I do consultation and really about inspiring people of what's possible. And so, we're all building a food system model. If it's on a half acre, if it's on 100 acres, it's part of a food system, and we need to build a different model right now. It really looks at the soil and the soil health. We have to look at our tools and techniques because we need to be energy efficient. We need to use the right tool at the right scale, and there's technique that is crucial. And if you don't know the technique or you feel like you're doing something wrong, you might be, and there's people out there on every scale. I also work with the Market Gardener Institute, which is looking at the market garden, human scale, small scale agriculture. They're based up there in Canada, but they have a worldwide network through their master gardener, their master class that they do. And the tools and techniques of the small farmer, we are now blessed that we have them. So I'll share some of those. But there's if you go to Johnny's or you go to Neversink or you go to Bootstrap Farmer, there's all these new companies now, TerraTech, that have human scaled tools for the half acre, 1 acre, 5 acre, 10 acre farm. So if you don't have the tractor or the big tractor, there's the seeders, the tilters, the different flame weeders and things that are at the right scale, which is amazing. Great time to get into farming with the tools. I love tools. The perennial polycultural part, Angela was talking about alley cropping and this kind of idea of rotational ways of moving through, but also looking at in the way we rotate, in the way that we plant, how can we stack functions and get multiple crops in the same area, which is the advantage that the small scale grower has, is that they can be more nuanced and look at the ways in which they can intercrop and do what's also called relay cropping. Some of you might be familiar with that, where you're intercropping things. Say you have kale or a brassica, and they take 60 to 75 days to canopy and grow up, but then you can do the lettuces in between. When the lettuces come out, you can put in onions. When the brassicas come out and then the onions mature, then you can put in depending on the time of the year, you can put in another plant, whether it's coming into tomato season or and then you just keep rotating through. The issue with that is you say, oh, well, when do we get the cover crop in? And the cover crop can be a relay crop in, it can be its own crop, or you can be growing your soil, making high quality compost and bringing that in there. So there's lots of different techniques, lots of different tools. fruit trees and shrubs, hedgerows and shelter belts, like looking at the ecosystem of the farm. You also have to look at the perennial edges and how can those be of benefit? Because we know that the farm isn't isolated in its own island. It has so much influence coming in. So whether you have wind that you need to break or you want to increase, you have to figure out the shelter belt. But then that hedgerow can be very specific to providing insect pest management, your IPM. Or you can even harvest things off of it for cut flowers or arrangements or food or fiber. So there's like lots of different ways that these things can work. The process of conversion, this is a really interesting thing, and I can break that down a little bit later of how we can accelerate the process. But often it's a 3-year conversion method, but you can actually accelerate that by timing and technique. And then what's your scale? So I'm curious, people want to put in the chat what scale they're working at, because I'm always curious, because that gives a lot of nuance. If you're working on a half acre or 5 acres as opposed to 10 acres, that's a big difference. And then a lot of farmers, small farms are, even 50 acres, 20 acres. That's a lot of land. But when you look at some of these larger operations, they become out of human scale and they're 100, 200, 500 acres. You're using a lot of different technique. So and you can do it that way. It's just you have to transition over to mechanization. I firmly believe that small scale farming is going to revolutionize the world and that we totally can grow at a human scale and it can be profitable, it can be manageable. And instead of, having a 500 acre farm, we can have, 100 5-acre farms. And the human labor it would take, the training is a key component, because then that requires more people. And there's a whole new generation of people that are excited, and if they have the right tools, techniques, and they know that they can be efficient, so they're not working 60 hours a week, but they're working a 40-hour a week, and it's profitable, then it's a win. So, and there's proven models out there. My recent projects, this is a rooftop farm. Some of you have seen this urban example. It's a 1-acre rooftop farm in Oakland that I designed and built and then operated. It's called the Rooftop Medicine Farm because a nonprofit we started operates it. And it's a high production market garden. This is another farm kind of up in the corner. You can see the first field taking shape. This is a 38-acre farm with about 15 acres of production and a whole wetland area on the coast. These two are some of the latest projects I was working on. And design works, frameworks, permaculture design, regenerative organics, certified. We're looking at these soil health, animal welfare, social fairness. This is kind of like baseline, but then you have these other modalities. So whatever modality you are using to design, looking at how is it, just making sure that it's taking everything into consideration and it's in the right context. But for this purpose of this, I'm going to really promote and share, that like ideas of looking at permaculture design, which is a design system. It's not a technique, but it's a design system that looks at taking care of earth, people, and making sure that whatever surplus is returned back to the earth and the people. And it looks at the whole farm, and how things are arranged in relative location to each other is a really good design methodology. You can find a different one or use a different one, but just, when we look at going to regenerative organic, there's these key components, and we're going to focus a little bit on what some of those key components are and some of the techniques to make sure that you are doing them. I'm curious if anyone is doing animals. I'm like so impressed right now by farmers in Europe, because there's all these smaller scale farmers, and over there, whether it's in Portugal or Germany, they have these market gardens and they're small, and that's like the bread and butter of what's happening. But they also have larger areas that have the animals and the woodland and the larger perennial crops, and it's just kind of like what they're doing. which I was like, this is amazing. They're kind of like, yeah, it is. This is what we do. And so I think there's a lot we can learn from other farmers in other parts of the world of how they're focused on kind of this production model, but then how they're creating a whole system that supports it. So with the animals, they have animals involved in the system to help bring in the digestive force and the manures and stuff for the fertility, and like they're trying to keep the farm productive on its own. Like, how can we close the loop? I think that's our ideal vision. How can we enclose the loop of the farm so that we're not constantly importing materials, seeds, fertility? Like, can we generate that on site? And some people say, no, you got this, and it's just a pattern of convenience that we are accustomed to. I was at this farm Monte Severa in Portugal. 20 years of organic, regenerative work, no-till, growing all his own seeds, has a market garden, does large field crops. They're regenerative organic certified. About 5 years ago, someone said, "You're doing regenerative," and he goes, "I am." And so I'm just doing organic, what I know what to do. And they're like, you should get certified. And they are certified now. It's a larger farm, 700-800 hectares, but they have the small market garden, they have the small production, and they have a whole system. And I look at a system like that, and if you don't have the whole elements or management, there's other people that do. And so if the situation is that you can't do it all, then it's about building relationships, and it's about connecting with the other farmers who are doing that so that you can create this food system. I talked about intercropping. This is a close-up of that. It's particular. One of my mentors, Bob Kennard, when I was asking him about different production stuff, he said, well, the more you do, the more you have to do. And so the more you put in, the more you increase, it's like we got lettuces on the left, but on the other side we got kale and lettuces, and then we got white Dutch clover. Okay, white Dutch clover's there, it's covering the soil, it's fixing nitrogen, it's producing biomass when we mow, but then we have to mow it because we can't have it encroach, and we don't want it to take over. So it's like, what is the benefit, and does that equal the effort? And there's certain things that do, and certain things that you try, and then you understand that not. But YouTube, other organizations, other examples, things like this can help enlighten some of those processes. Angela,
Ben, you might check the chat, because Sarah wrote in some things that you might want to check a look out.
Okay, because I'm in share mode. Do you want to read what it is, or what the chat is?
Sure. You had asked about what everybody was raising, and Sarah said we have 73 hens along with the half acre. A lot of the weeds from the garden go to the hens for food, and we use their manure as additions to compost back to the garden.
Excellent. And one thing, so a farm I'm at right now doesn't have that many hens, but is a similar system. And one thing we realized is there was a lot of energy going from bringing the waste to the chickens, and then the chickens' manure to the compost. And so through just observation and design, we created some different alleyways for the chickens to travel on. And when we opened up an alleyway in between the orchard with a double fence going on each side, only 4 feet high, they had clipped wings. I don't know, some don't, but then we were able to bring just throw over the top of that little alleyway a lot of the waste that then they would run out to meat. They would eat it there, and then we created little openings to then pull the manure out and different, so there's like different ideas of how you can incorporate and have the animals work more with you than you having to move as much of the material. So it'd be cool to see, I think document your work. So Sarah, like, you're doing that, document it, learn, share it with others, because I'm sure there's some things you're doing that are working amazing that other people who might get into chickens will be like, how do I do that? And you're like, this is how you do it. This is a different way to do it. Is there another chat in there you want to mention, or should we keep going?
That's all for now.
Okay. Carrie. Basil. I love basil. Let's see. My screen is stuck. Okay. I put in microgreen production here just in the sense that we have small scale veggie production. A simple rack with lights and trays that you can, on this you can see the middle rack, it has starts on it. This is earlier in the year when we're not putting them in the greenhouse. We're starting our starts. Or actually this is in the rooftop farm where we didn't have a greenhouse, and so we were just starting starts under lights and then bringing them up to once they germinated. But we incorporated it into our microgreen production. I hadn't done microgreen production before, but kept hearing about it. And then the nutrient density of microgreens is super high. You don't need that big of a space. They grow super quick, and it's super profitable. So it's a lot of wins there. The seed, getting it, and then you can feed the leftovers after you cut it to the chickens or to the worms is what we did. So it's really good food and fodder for them. But whether it's radish or peas or sunflowers, or there's all kinds of microgreens out there. Chefs love them, people love them. You can package them, you can sell a whole tray, but it's not that much work. And so I just encourage, if you have a smaller space and you have a garage or some other space that you're like, I could, for a $200-300 investment, you're making, it's like 5 minutes a day doing stuff. I was just doing this on the side, and then all of a sudden they were bringing in, hundreds of dollars a week. And I was like, oh gosh, I did the math, and it's like a 300% value for my time and energy, for what I was doing. So just think about, and there's a lot of resources online. There's a lot of small classes. There's all kinds of stuff. And it's really just a few $100 investment. You can get all the stuff at like Home Depot or your local hardware store. And then you get the seeds from, True Leaf or Johnny's or different things. There's ways you can get that. In the transition of getting to regeneration and regenerative, I've shared this slide with you all before, is like there's kind of a step process. And I think right now we're in this process of reckoning and returning. This course, like what we're talking right now, is like, we're returning to relationship of how we're going to produce food in this way. A lot of people, when they start going towards regeneration, there's a restoration process where they're restoring the soil health. They're restoring a balance because it's out of balance, it's out of whack. They've been extracting, putting in inputs, sometimes synthetic, and the soil's dead. We need to restore that to kind of create this balance. Then once we get to a certain level, then we can do regeneration. And as we regenerate the soil, then we create a resilient system. And my thinking on this is that it is a resilient agricultural food system that we're trying to create, not just a regenerative one, but a resilient one. Now, there's a lot of concern that people have around the finances and the ways in which you can go from the restorational process to the regeneration process, and it takes time, and we need to use synthetics and this and that. I've been blown away at, like, really surprised when you do it at the right timing and in the right way, how quickly the soil can resuscitate. Meaning that, getting back to soil moisture, your biggest ally in this whole process is understanding your soil and working it when the soil moisture is at the right consistency. Because water is life and your soil is alive, if it's too dry, the biggest thing is when you come in to work the land, you want the earth to be receptive to whatever you're doing to it. So if you're digging it with a fork or a shovel or a non-inversion plow, whatever it is, you want the soil to be receptive. And the way that the soil is receptive is when the soil moisture is correct. And that's another benefit at the right scale. Smaller scale, you can be more nuanced on that. When you're dealing with a large scale, you have different soil types, you have different ways that you're having to engage. But when the soil moisture is correct, then you can benefit. You have to, and sometimes it's not on your time frame because you're going with the rain and the different stuff, where it's too wet, it's too dry. You want that Goldilocks moment. So you have to pre-irrigate, or you have to use sprinklers or tape or whatever it is to get it at that right temp, and then you have a window that you have to be able to work it. Now, some people get into no-till tillage. I'm, conservation tillage, minimal tillage. There is actually, it's been shown now. I think everyone really focused on no-till because of the detriment, understanding the detriment of these large-scale operations, and when they till, how because of the tillage, how degenerative those systems have been. So it's no-till, no-till. But as we look at tillage and actually what it is, what it does, and done at the right time, right scale, in the appropriate way, it actually can be very beneficial to the soil microbiome. You can help the crop residues break down and get incorporated, but you have to be attentive to when you're doing it and how you're doing it and what depth you're doing it, what tools you're using. So, not inverting the soil levels. So we're you want to think about your soil at every 3-inch space, and that you're never wanting to invert those layers. So if you take a rototiller and you're, churning it all up at the speed, that's going to really, become an issue for the soil social biome of it, and how it works together. But if you're incorporating the top couple of inches and you're using maybe a non-inversion tillage plow, like a keyline plow, that's a very precise angle that comes in and opens up the soil but doesn't invert it, doesn't churn it, and does it at the right soil moisture, you can actually accelerate the way in which the soil responds and can churn towards a more regenerative system. Now that's the physical component. I know I'm stuck on this slide because I'm starting to go on a different tangent. But the physical component. Then there's the biological component, and the biological component is the cover crops. And I'm going to talk about the cover crops here. Here's an example of a project I did in New Zealand. It was a retreat center. You can see up on the right, there's a lot, and then another lot below. Agroforestry, food production, kind of came in and looked at this water, because water drives the design, and how do we move the water across the farm. So originally it was just kind of laid out as just and they weren't looking at the topographical lines. If you have slope, every land has slope, but there's a lot of flat land. But if you do have slope, and looking at how you can harvest water using the contours, that is a very strategic thing to do. And how we then, I just share this as an example of how you incorporate food production using the slope. This is a project in Mississippi that's a larger scale operation, but approaching it with some smaller scale areas for education. And it's one of the oldest Black-owned co-ops in the country. They're producing mixed vegetables. I did an assessment with 2 trips and to kind of really understand what was going on and the initial part, and have been now working with them for a couple of years. Lots of heavy tillage, lots of conventional ag all around them. We're talking tens of thousands of acres of cotton, soy, and corn. And they have about 1,000 acres. Then they're looking at a 50-acre transition and a 5-acre specific educational market garden. And their desire to do this was out of health. Their community was getting sick, and they realized that it was a lot of the chemicals. And so they said, well, we want to start growing food and being a part of the change. They didn't know they had no idea of how to do it. They just knew they had to stop spraying. And this is where I was impressed at the resiliency of the soil. Now, this is the Mississippi Delta, which, has, millennia of soil fertility, and it's been poorly treated for a long time, but the vitality is still there. And I was incredibly impressed at them going cold turkey, just stopping all spraying, stopping all conventional, and going, we're going to go organic. And yeah, they had some pests. Yeah, they had some little problems, but they were pretty. I was like, what are you guys doing here? Like, how is this happening? They're like, oh, we're just doing this organic, this and that. We don't actually know what we're doing. That's why you're here. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, wow, you're still doing some of these practices with the disc and the different thing, but you just took away the chemicals. And now it's about how do we transition the practice. So they transitioned the inputs. So they went from synthetics to organics. Now, how do we boost that fertility? How do we get the practices in? And really the cover cropping was like the key element. And that's kind of the hard part to get people to shift their mind. Here's a kind of picture of the space that we were working with and how we're building together the process. This is the soil when I first got there, very heavy, and they till it when it's wet, and it's like it doesn't look that good, right? We have to understand, some of you already know all this stuff, but it's like we have to understand what our soil is made up of, and how we work it is really important. We can do different tests, different soil maps. It's always good to get soil maps. There's an aggregate test that's really awesome to do, where you basically can put the soil into the water and see how stable it is. And I know we can share some of those resources. But getting them to first just go from what they would normally till and then kind of wait, and it would kind of sit there, and then they would just till it again and plant their crop, to say, hey, let's plant a cover crop. And they're like, what's a cover crop? And most of you know what cover crop is, but it's like covering the soil, but also it's like an earth crop. It's a crop to feed the soil. And this is where I can see, if done correctly with the diversity in the acceleration process, that you can, within 9 to 12 months, like totally shift the whole like soil microbiome and the energy of the land. And green cover, John Kempf and the work that he's doing with AEA, and like some of these other farmers are showing and doing examples where they're showing how, by doing the right things at the right time, how quickly they can start that conversion. So it's totally possible. Diversity of cover crop, it's not just doing one, not doing two. If you start getting 7, 10, 12 different varieties of cover crop in a mix, it's been shown that increases the diversity, accelerates, kind of like jumpstarts the whole biological engine. And you can do that on the smallest of scale and the largest of scale. Smaller scale is you can get even more nuance, but like getting a lot in there. Don't just focus on one, get a lot of different varieties in there. And you might be growing like different varieties separately. It's been shown that when you put them together, they all do better. So you could grow your peas or your bell beans, fava beans, and then some, oats, and they'll all grow to a certain level. If you mix them all together, they all do better. There's the way in which their roots relate, the way in which they help each other. It's just amazing. And Christine Jones, some of you might know who Christine Jones is. She's a scientist, soil scientist. She's now retired, but she's done an incredible body of work demonstrating and showing the ways in which the biological integration is key. And I just can't stress cover crop enough. I'm in love with cover crop. It's probably my favorite thing to grow. I mean, I like growing basil and tomatoes and everything. Cover crop's good. Here's an example of using cover crop, conversion tillage, mix rye and crimson clover, and then using the cover and then incorporating into cotton. And so, keeping the soil covered. Now this is getting into a larger scale, but this is, something that you can see you could do this on a smaller scale as well. Now, tools. Is there any questions, thoughts on any of that right now? I see, Greg, you took your,
Yes.
took your thing off. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I would cover retaining cover crops, Benjamin.
Yes.
I have a vineyard and I can't till my cover crop in. I've got a good perennial patch, and when we get normal moisture, everything great. When it's dry, I just crimp roller it down.
Yep.
But when we got normal moisture, I mow and blow. So I blow into the vineyard row away from the aisle, but I never incorporated anymore. Like 10 or 15 years ago I did, but
Yep.
I found it very hard to work in that with tractors and on cloddy soil. But what is your experience with the loss of all that you're doing there if you use cover crop but you don't incorporate it? If you just do a mow and blow, you'll wind up with a nice windrow. It's a 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch diameter windrow on either side of the vine itself, and it just sits there. I know there are worms under it big time, but of course the microbes probably can't get at it above soil. But of course you lose a lot of it to CO2 respiration and loss. But what can you tell us? You've probably got a pretty good experience with this.
That's a great question and great observation. What's your cover crop mix? What are you using?
I have 6 different types of legumes and 4 different grasses and a bunch of forbs and weeds. So it's it's chest high when I mow it or roll or crimp it.
And do you do like a flail mower? Is that what you're doing?
I used to, but I use a rotary mower to blow it in a windrow right onto the row from the aisle. And so you wind up with what looks like what most people think of a vineyard in the aisle.
Right.
It's mowed, but the windrow piles up in the row itself on the vines.
I see. And that
just sits there.
And that probably helps with weed suppression as well, a little bit on your things. And so you're observing, you're seeing what it's doing, you've adjusted. Now, there's a really good book by John Stilka called The Soil Owner's Handbook or Soil Owner's Manual. And I, about 4 years ago, I was reading that, and because I was having the same issue with too much crop residue left on the top, and I had the same question. It's like, this needs to be incorporated, but in a perennial system, and also getting the tractor in there, it's difficult, and you don't really, and then you're like, that it's not. Is there a different way? The different way is by empowering, working with the microbes to help break down that crop residue. How do you do that? You get your C to N ratio, and there's a great farmer close to you guys, Luke Peterson, who has done a lot of experimentation with his cover crops to get the C to N ratio at the right place, so that you have the carbon to nitrogen ratio within the cover crop residue, so that the microbes will break it down. And what I did was incorporating turnip at about 5%. So incorporated daikon radish 5. And I had a little extra for this one section. It ended up being about 10%. And what happened there? They broke it down too quick. We basically mowed it. I flail mowed it, and then they just ate it up. It was it was amazing. We put because we were doing silage tarping. We were mowing, and then we were putting silage tarp down for 2 to 3 weeks, and then we would take it off, and then prep the beds and go ready. That was for the veggie production. And what was happening originally is we were mowing. Again, it was chest high, super diverse cover crop, triticale, vetch, different peas, different bell beans. It was beautiful. Mow it down, get this nice layer, and then we'd put the silage tarp on, and then when we'd pull it off, there would still be all this residue. And the team was then having to rake it off, and they're like, now we have to incorporate it, and it's getting stuck, and they were frustrated. Incorporated the 5% daikon radish, pulled the tie-up off, it was pretty much gone. They just ate it all. Luke, up there in Minnesota, he was like, I was talking to him about it, he's like, I do that, and I use the snow, I get it going right to the place, and the snow terminates the cover crop, insulates it. In the spring when it melts off, it's bare soil. And then he's ready to go, and he doesn't have to, and he's didn't do any tillage, didn't do anything, but he's got a nice ready field.
Isn't it the worms that are doing that decomposition?
It's not just the worms. No, it's the whole social microbiome of the soil. There's like so many things coming in there. It's like the microorganisms, all the different micro and macroorganisms working together to eat it.
Well, I've always heard that, Benjamin, but they live in the soil, and my mullen blow is that tall above the soil. I always thought the worms must be the ones breaking it down, and of course the microbes take the vermin.
Yeah, I mean they're like the king composters of that material, right? So they definitely are the big like kid on the block, so to speak. Now it would be interesting because you're like blowing it over. If you were to incorporate that and go back to flail mowing and how that might just be incorporated into the soil, that's the experimentation.
Flail mowing, a week later you can't see anything because it breaks it up so finely that it looks like you really blew it, because there's nothing left. And I'm pretty sure the worms aren't getting that. It's just that it's such a small particle size. I just been fascinated by that close interface on a 2-inch cut long piece of forb, and all the residue that was with it had been cut up by a flail mower. It's not visible on the surface.
Now there's Greg, I would encourage, there's some really amazing regenerative vineyards out there that are doing some really awesome stuff with different clovers and different crops that they mow and let grow. Piscini's Ranch is a really good one here in California, and also Tablas Ranch. We can send off some different or like look at some different ones that they're doing perennial cover crops and they're mowing them. Sometimes they're bringing in sheep to do grazing and whatnot. But they're not just growing the winter cover crop and then keeping it clean. They're actually making sure that they have living cover, and sometimes they'll cut it. They'll do the flail mower like you said, and it's a little bit, and then they'll come in with a seed drill when the soil moisture is right, put in the clover. It's covered, the clover comes up, and then when it gets to the ground, then they just kind of let it do its thing, or they mow it. There's enough soil moisture in there, or they're getting enough. It gets super dry in the summer, kind of dies back on its own and just creates a mulch, over the top. So they get it going, it grows, and then it just dies right there, and then you have like a straw mulch kind of thing. So there's, lots of different ideas there. But great, that's a great example of like a perennial system and versus just the annual cycle of rotation. So there's different nuances there to look at. There's really great tools out there. These are just hand tools. I would encourage people to look at some of the mechanized tools. Farmer's Friend is a really good one. Bootstrap Farmer, TerraTech. These are all really good things. But just looking at like some of the simple tools that we have that are good. Hedgerows and windbreaks. Can't say enough about them as far as looking at the different types of plants that we want to have incorporated into the farm is really important. And I'm gonna not go into, I had a couple of examples. Maybe I'll just show this last one of converting a vacant lot. That window's closed. Well, anyway, there's different systems that we can do, and I'll stop there so we have enough time to have any other questions or what you want to say, Angela. I hope that was helpful, and I really am grateful, those that are here, but anyone else who's listening, just the idea and the reality of like engaging in the food system and growing at the scale that you can to contribute in this way, because we're in a big shift, a big transition of regenerating our whole food system, and the small scale vegetable production is something that's like neighborhood level, bioregional like base that can happen and needs to happen. The larger grain production and stuff, that's where the big farms need to, we need larger area to do the cereals and do all this stuff. But the small scale vegetable production, that can be like, we can't have enough really with the size of our population, and especially good organic vegetable production. So I will make a plug for the Market Gardener Institute again as a great resource. Some of you know JM Fortier. I work with him and their program. They have a master class, but they also have a lot of great free resources as well. So really good resources and books out of there. MGI.
Sarah did have one question about, do you have any recommended sites for regenerative farming that you could refer people to?
There is a lot of organic farmers who are regenerative again, it's the techniques. And so if they're doing something that's ecological and they're regenerating the soil and the place, there's a lot of them that are out there. So as far as ones that I particularly like, Ben Hartman with Clay Bottom Farm, I mean, JM's stuff that he's doing, there's a whole network of farmers through the Market Gardener Institute that are doing stuff. There's guys in Pennsylvania. Rodale is a very interesting institute because they're really focused on the research, but they're also doing a lot of regenerative farming techniques. Patriot Farms, isn't that like? There's a whole list of people we go through, and I guess Sarah, are you based right there, or like where are you wanting to just look for online resources or videos and stuff? I guess is the question, because if you put in Market Gardener regenerative farm, I mean, I think Jesse at No Till, he does No Till podcast. There's a lot of great podcasts out there, and usually they host a lot of these farmers. So the Market Gardener Institute, they have great folks on there, but then also Jesse, is it Jesse Smith, the No Till podcast? Like, so he's no till, but there's also some like little cultivation that happens. But he has a lot of great people on there too. So yeah, there's a lot of good examples. In California, there's ones. I think the biggest thing is to look at finding a farm and then asking where their inputs are coming from. And if they have a closed loop, that's the farm to really be looking at, because
I agree.
Yeah, there's like some here in California where it's like, wow, this is a great regenerative farm, but they're like importing, 20 tons of compost every, 6 months or something. And it's like, okay. And then there's farms. I'm really inspired about the farmers in Portugal right now and some of the work they're doing, because they're really seeing how to close the loop and do it right on. So like Vivid Farms is one that if you look up Vivid Farms in Portugal, they're doing some really interesting stuff. Yeah.
Well, we're excited.
Deep Seed.
Ben.
I'm going to just say that last one. Deep Seed podcast. Raphael. He's traveling all over doing video podcasting.
Okay.
These farms.
Okay.
It's really cool.
Awesome.